Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. This is John with Gun Deals, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Hi-Point C9. Now, this is a meme pistol online, although some people tend to overestimate its abilities. So we're going to be going through this, but before that, if you don't know, Gun Deals is a website that collects some of the best deals in the industry, and they just provide you with links. They don't buy or sell anything or take your money. They merely provide you with deals, the best links in the industry. So if you're looking for something, go ahead and check them out first. They probably have it for the best price. And on top of that, of course, if you could like, share, and subscribe, and go ahead and comment your craziest H-Point C9 story that you've ever heard, because I've heard a lot of them online. So getting into this, what is this? This is a 9mm polymer framed, technically striker fired handgun. Feeds from a single stack 8-round magazine chambered in 9mm. Of course, they do make 10-rounders. However, this only comes with a singular 8-round magazine. So in terms of capacity, it is very much so in line with some more micro compact 9mm. However, in terms of size and weight, we'll get into that in a minute, it's much more of a full-size handgun. So some of the features on it, we of course have a polymer lower. It does have removable grips, and they do make aftermarket grips for the lower here. So if they're not comfortable for your hands, you could definitely switch them out. There's not really any grip on them whatsoever. It's more of just a super mild texture on it. So it doesn't really grip very well to your hands. It does have a good magazine release. The magazines do drop free with some force, and the magazine release is basically in the perfect position for you to actuate with your right hand. I don't have very large hands, so some magazine releases require me to break my grip a little bit more. This one here is just fine, and it's not too pronounced that I'm hitting it accidentally. It's just fine. This model does have a safety on it, and it also has a safety that doubles as a slide lock and a slide stop. So basically, in the safe position, you cannot pull the trigger, and of course the slide will not move because it is actually a piece of metal that locks the slide in place. Now, the slide does lock back after the last round, as you would hope and expect. However, there is no slide release. So when the magazine is in, you have an empty magazine in, there is no way to get that slide forward again. So if you were to reload it, you need to reload a full magazine or something with some ammunition in it, and then rack the slide, and it will of course go forward. But since we're using an empty magazine, it's not going to go forward on us. So rack the slide, and it will of course go forward again. Now, on top of that, on top of the thumb safety that it has here on the left side of the handgun, it also has a magazine safety. So we are clear, of course, that I am pulling the trigger very hard, but there is a magazine safety. So until I have the magazine in, I cannot pull the trigger. A very terrible trigger. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I don't like that for a couple reasons. One, it makes it really hard to dry fire the handgun because you need to have a magazine in it. Some people are comfortable with doing that. Some people are not comfortable dry firing with any magazines even nearby. So depending on your personal preference, you may or may not like that, especially if you actually want to practice and get good with this handgun without shooting off a ton of very expensive 9mm. So now let's go ahead and talk about the slide. Now, something you'll notice about this gun is it is very bulky looking, and the reason for that is it needs all of that additional weight because this does not run on a tilting barrel design like you will get in like a Glock 17 or something like that, where the barrel is actually somewhat free-floated, but it moves around because of course it uses that tilting action to delay the opening just a tiny bit, so that the case pressure is safe enough to where when you extract that round, it doesn't blow open the side and eject stuff into your face. However, on the Hi-Point C9, there is nothing holding the slide back, just a little bit of spring tension, and there is nothing locking or unlocking, so the only thing holding it forward is just some spring tension. So the way that they slow down the slide enough to make it safe that when you extract the case, it doesn't blow out the side, is by adding a lot of weight, because this is just a straight direct blowback. So it just uses the force of the projectile leaving to throw the slide back. And to make that slide go slow enough, they add a lot of weight. Now what that means is you get a very weird recoil impulse. It was really throwing me off in the beginning because it does not recoil like a normal handgun. I would say it's a slower recoil impulse, but it's much more. It's like shooting 45 versus shooting 9mm, where 9mm doesn't have a ton of recoil, but it's very snappy. This has a lot of recoil considering, but it's very slow. So it's easy to watch your sights just rise and fall, but it's a much more different recoil impulse than you're used to if you shoot a lot of just tilting action 9mm. Something else that I should mention is that the slide is not steel. It is a pot metal amalgamation of a bunch of different really crappy materials. It's literally just a lot of material there for weight. It would be a lot more expensive if they had to put this much steel in their slide. So I do understand why they do that. And if you really look online, you can find these slides breaking all the time because they are just not made of the most high quality materials. Now, one minor advantage from having a direct blowback system in your handgun is that your barrel is actually fixed. So a fixed barrel theoretically is more accurate than a Browning tilting action barrel or something like that, because there is some play within the barrel itself. So how tight that barrel locks and unlocks kind of dictates the accuracy. So theoretically, this is a very accurate handgun. However, because the sights are so poor, which we'll talk about in just a second, it's not really that accurate of a handgun. So while it is an accurate handgun, most handguns are more accurate than the shooter, and this is no different. Now, if we do talk about the sights, there are a couple different models. I have the model that has the ghost ring sights. So the ghost ring sight in the rear is adjustable for windage and elevation, and the front sight is fixed with a yellow blade on it, which looks quite nice. However, ghost ring sights are some of the slowest sights to acquire because they have that completely closed off aperture in the back, which makes them much slower than like your open 3-dot variety sights. And it does take some getting used to, and once you get used to it, it's just fine, but definitely it points a little bit different than a lot of other handguns, and that is a very unique sighting system. Again, it is technically a more fine, precise aiming method. But I'm not a big fan of it just because it is so much slower. And again, we're talking about a handgun, so precision is not always the most important thing when talking about a handgun. Also, the rear sight is also completely plastic, so you can also break these off. Now, you can also swap out the sights if you just want the rear U-notch style sights, but again, this is just the way that mine came. So we've talked about it a little bit, but let's go ahead and talk about the trigger. So we are, of course, clear, and the trigger is a striker-fired handgun, so there's not much take-up, maybe like 1 millimeter of take-up, and then you hit a very hard wall. And then you have a lot of creep and a very, very gritty take-up, if you guys can see it. So you have very little slop, a little play in the beginning that the trigger is just kind of moving back and forth with no resistance. Then you hit a very hard wall, and then you build to like 7 or 8 pounds. And then you kind of go like halfway through the wall, and there's like a secondary wall. And then from there you build a couple more pounds, and then it eventually breaks. It feels like it has a 10-pound trigger. It's probably only like 7 or 8 pounds, but it definitely feels like you have a incredibly heavy trigger. So again, it does that thing where you have no take-up in the beginning, and you just hit that little bit of play, and then you hit the hard wall, you pull through, you kind of hit a second wall, and then you pull harder and harder and harder, and then the gun eventually breaks. Now, normally I would say that would really slow you down having that heavy of a trigger. However, again, as long as you master the trigger, it's not really going to affect your accuracy at all because it is fairly consistent, so that is a good thing. And on top of that, because the cycle of the gun is so slow with that direct blowback, with that very, very heavy slide, it's really not going to slow you down at all either, just because you're going to be waiting for your sights to come back. Even if you're very aggressively getting into the gun and pushing it down, you're still going to be waiting for those sights to go back down just because of how slow the recoil impulse is. Now, one thing that you hear online anyways is that these are very reliable handguns, and that is just not the case with this gun anyways. It basically jammed every time when trying to use steel case ammunition. The slide would not go all the way into battery, and so I would have to very vigorously slam it from the back, and it also did that with some brass cased ammunition as well, and that's after cleaning and lubricating. Now, this is a well broken in handgun. I've had this for over a year. My brother's had it for over a year, I should say. So if you don't touch the slide at all, it will work. So you have to like adjust your grip, which is not ideal. And it does tend to do better with brass cased ammunition. However, without doing any sort of torture testing, you know, putting it in mud or water or anything like that, it does like to jam up quite frequently. Now, with all of that being said, I have said very few positive things about this handgun, but one of the things that is going to be the most positive about it is its price. You can find these, back in the day, you could find them for just over $100. Every now and again, you could find somebody selling them online for like $99. And these are the cheapest handgun you can buy. Even now, I think you can still get it for like $150 or so, which is about 50 to 75 bucks cheaper than the next alternative, which is like a Sky CPX2 or some lower end Taurus models. The difference with all those other handguns is they're far better, in my opinion. I've had experience with the Sky CPX2 and all the Taurus handguns have been very reliable from what I've seen. So I would recommend all of those over this gun, except for two reasons. One is, I understand that some people are on incredibly small budgets. So if you're a person who needs a handgun and you can live with all of the downsides of this handgun and you only have, say, 150 bucks to spend, this is really your only option. So for some people, I absolutely get it. If you have to have one just for your own personal protection or something like that, and this is your only option, then you know it is an option, and it is somewhat reliable, and as long as you get used to the gun and feed it the ammunition that it likes, it should be okay for you. I don't really recommend it for home defense just because it does not have a light, so you'll need some sort of other light source because it does not have a rail on it. I'm sure you could get some sort of like universal light that mounts to the front of the trigger guard, but those are not very good. And the other reason to buy this gun is because it is a meme online. It is, of course, the Yeet cannon, and they made the YC9. So there are reasons to get it. You can get it in like dollar bill paint jobs and stuff like that, and for certain applications as just a funny range toy, it does make sense for those sort of things. But for most shooters, 99% of shooters, I would recommend ignoring it. If you have a friend who has one, go ahead and shoot it and feel how bad it is, because it is kind of a unique experience shooting it. But for actually owning one, I really don't recommend it, even though it is so cheap that most people could own like 2 or 3 and not really matter all that much. But no, I really don't recommend the handgun, again, unless you're in one of those categories where either this is the only thing you can afford, then of course go ahead and get it, or if you just want it for a meme range toy, which it can be kind of fun as a meme range toy to kind of pass around to everybody, and everybody can comment about how much they hate it. So that is about it for the video. Oh, actually, something I didn't mention is that it's also like 30 ounces, and this Glock 26 Polymer 80 is like 24 ounces. This Glock 17 is like 25 ounces, and this is 30 ounces with only an 8-round capacity, so it's very, very heavy as well. They don't make a lot of holsters for it either, so there's a lot of downsides to it, which is why I really don't recommend it. But that is about it for the video, guys. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, thank you to Gun Deals. Go ahead and check them out. Again, if you're looking for anything, including the Height Point C9, you can actually find it on there for the best deal in the industry. So that is about it, guys. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace off.